Today being Halloween, I thought it would be an excellent time to discuss the topic of evil. It's a subject I've been meaning to discuss for a while since the nature of evil is extremely compelling to think about, and cinema has produced many incredible villains over the past 2 decades that will help aid the discussion. Now, it's worth starting this video by trying to define what people mean when they describe someone or something as evil. In many horror films, which you've probably been watching over the past few weeks, the villains tend to be archetypal evil, or pure evil. The classic example of this is Michael Myers in the original Halloween.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Pure evil, in my mind, is essentially demonic evil, and demons also play a role in many famous horror films, of course. It is a 24/7 urge to destroy physically and morally. It is a lust for suffering and a rejection of everything that could be considered good and pure. C.S. Lewis gives a great description of it in his science fiction book Pearlandra. The narrator is referring to a man possessed by the devil in the quote I'm about to read. It was not like dealing with a wicked politician at all. It was much more like being set to guard an imbecile or a monkey or a very nasty child. The possessed person he's referring to does nothing but destroy whatever he can find. He tears the extremities off animals, and when he can't find animals, he tears up plants. It's destructive and horrific, but it's unintelligent. And I think that description is closer to the truth than the seductive and manipulative form of pure evil that we sometimes see in entertainment. It is a serious question whether such a form of evil actually exists. Religious people would more than likely say yes, because demonic evil is usually a part of the mythology. Sauron from Lord of the Rings, for example, is Tolkien's interpretation. Tolkien was, of course, a Christian. For those who are not religious, answers will vary. An archetypal evil is very, very difficult to portray in film without it becoming cartoonish. Peter Jackson did Sauron quite well. There was something uniquely sinister about his voice and the black speech, but more times than not, archetypal evil just doesn't turn out too well. I may need to make a video discussing this brand of evil more in the future, but today I want to discuss the evil we see come from humans, which I don't think is pure evil. I do believe good and evil exist, but I don't think it can possess somebody wholly and completely. People do commit evil deeds, but it's important to understand why beyond just, well, they're pure evil. So, to investigate the matter, we're going to be looking at two of the best antagonists of modern cinema, Heath Ledger's Joker and Kevin Spacey's John Doe. And to help understand their evil behavior, I'm going to be using some ideas from M. Scott Peck, a man who spent much of his life considering the nature of evil, and I think his observations are generally right on the mark. The first point of order is understanding why we're looking at these characters in the first place. It seems obvious, but it's worth digging a little bit deeper. We can't say the Joker is evil, and again, not pure archetypal evil, but we can say he's evil only because he does evil things. We've all done evil things at one point or another. And we can't say the Joker is evil because his evil is of a higher magnitude. Yes, the Joker is a murderer, but there are people in prison for murder right now who can't be described as evil. Sometimes people fly off the handle and do terrible things. What makes the Joker and John Doe uniquely sinister is the fact that both men absolutely refuse to recognize that what they're doing is evil. They cause suffering and brush it off as just another day in the office. So if they're not possessed by some form of pure evil, how could they both behave in such a way? That is the question we need to answer. The obvious response, and the response we often see in entertainment, is they're psychopaths. And it would be hard to argue that both men are not skewed psychologically in that way, but their capacity for evil is not solely down to that factor, as we will discuss. If you're looking for a character whose evil actions appear to be a complete byproduct of psychopathy, watch Breaking Bad and look out for Todd Elquist. He's not a schemer, he doesn't have articulated beliefs, and he has an innocence to him which can sometimes be seen with psychopaths who genuinely cannot distinguish good from bad. But for the Joker and John Doe, we're going to look at another psychological factor, which is described by M. Scott Peck. The essential component of evil is not the absence of a sense of sin or imperfection, but the unwillingness to tolerate that sense. At one and the same time, the evil are aware of their evil and trying to avoid the awareness. The Joker and John Doe both use a similar idea to avoid bringing their evil under the light of consciousness, and they both declare it proudly, like they've reached a conclusion that nobody else has been able to reach. What they don't realize is they're really trying to convince themselves. We begin with the most famous scene of The Dark Knight, the interrogation scene. You could watch it 1,000 times and still get goosebumps. And it's a scene where we learn the most about the Joker and what's going on inside his mind. The first line that has relevance to what we're speaking about is when Bruce condemns the Joker as garbage who kills for money, and the Joker can't accept that. He snaps at Bruce for talking like one of the cops, and then he delivers his soliloquy on human nature.
To be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
The Joker cannot admit that he is distinctly evil. He cannot accept that he's any worse than those trying to prevent him from causing chaos. He's telling Bruce that he is simply behaving without the chains of society. If society crumbles, if people are forced to choose between their survival and acting morally, they're going to choose survival. The Joker is projecting his evil onto the world to avoid confronting the corruption of his own soul. And he spends the rest of the movie attempting to prove his thesis, the ultimate experiment being the two boats rigged with explosives. Unfortunately for the Joker, his experiment does not go as expected. The people on the boats, or at least a couple of people, choose a moral death instead of self-preservation. And you could say in reality someone would have pulled the trigger, possibly, maybe probably, but the point Nolan is trying to make is there would not be unanimity. Some people would choose to do what's right. The Joker thinks everyone would choose to be like him when they're backed against the wall. When it hits him that this assumption is wrong, you can see the subtle anguish on his face. Ledger does an excellent job portraying it. But just like Peck says, even after the people on the boat contradict his belief, the Joker continues to deny his singular evil. He tells Bruce that yes, the people might have chosen good this time, but just wait until their spirit breaks completely. When they see what happened to Harvey, then they will expose themselves for being just like me. Commissioner Gordon and Bruce hide the truth behind the figure of Batman, but it really doesn't make a difference. If the people saw the truth of Harvey and did not turn against each other, the Joker would just say, well, that didn't work, but once this terrible event happens, then they'll be like me. He would never accept the failure of his thesis because, as Peck points out, the evil hate the light of goodness that shows them up, the light of scrutiny that exposes them, and the light of truth that penetrates their deception. John Doe incorporates a similar philosophy to the Joker, but he actually takes it a step further. John believes that the world has turned its back on traditional Christian morality and that he has a responsibility to wake up the ignorant sinners. And he does this by committing some of the most horrific murders in film history, all of which are a play on the 7 deadly sins. He gets this idea from Dante's Divine Comedy, specifically Purgatorio. The souls that climb Mount Purgatory to get to heaven are taught virtues which are the inverse of their particular sin. For instance, the envious have their eyes shut by wire. The great difference is, the souls on Mount Purgatory are willfully and joyfully enduring their punishments to move closer to God, who is their only judge. John Doe is just some guy, a tremendously destructive and unstable guy, but his moral perception is never turned inward, apart from an admission of jealousy towards David. He doesn't consider himself to be evil, yet he sees the evil in those around him. This tendency makes him feel pure and beyond criticism.
By lying with every breath that he could muster to keeping murderers and rapists on the streets.
Murderers.
A woman.
Murderers, John, like
A
yourself.
woman.
The Joker commits evil acts, but refuses to put himself below others. His worldview is more nihilistic. John Doe commits evil acts, but puts himself above others. And in his own mind, being killed by David makes him a martyr. It's a moralistic sleight of hand. John likes the morals taught in the Bible, but for whatever reason, most likely a psychological problem, he has a desperate urge to violate all of those morals. There is only one idea that could help him solve that puzzle, and he states it crystal clear. I'm above the sinners around me, I was chosen by God, so I have a mandate to act on my urges and avoid the guilty sentence that others deserve. The Joker and John are frequently referred to as incarnations of evil or chaos or just psychopaths. But again, pure evil does not need thought behind it, it's mindless destruction, and psychopaths have a similar nature. They tend to be mindlessly destructive and impulsive. They don't need to incorporate principles or philosophies because they just can't sense that what they're doing is wrong. Both characters have antisocial personalities, but like most evil people, they depend on certain ideas to prevent them from stepping in front of a mirror and recognizing their own evil. And dictators of the 20th century also relied on similar tricks. Fascism and communism both relied on scapegoats who acted as cover for their own evil. And I want to conclude this video by touching on one other point made by M. Scott Peck, which I thought was pretty remarkable and true. A very common question raised in religious discussions and metaphysical discussions is, why is there so much evil in the world? How could people like the Joker or John Doe exist? This is the exact question Sheriff Bell wrestles with in No Country as he faces down another crazed killer, Anton Chigurh. But the better question to ask is, why is there good in the world? I think most people, including myself, believe that humans tend to gravitate towards evil behavior. When kids are young, a lot of time is spent trying to make sure they don't act on their animalistic instincts. And even look at nature. It's all death and decay. For something to live, something has to die. It's a pretty damn morbid picture. The Joker recognizes this, but he makes a slight mistake. He believes people are purely bad when the chips are down and it's life or death. But he hides from the truth, which is, our evil world has been contaminated by good. And for some reason, it doesn't seem to fade, even when put in the most horrible circumstances. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl makes this evidently clear. The battle between good and evil, humility and pride, self-knowledge and self-deception, is destined to go on forever. And it's not fought between nations or political parties. It is fought in every individual human heart, and it will remain that way until the last human being returns to the dust.